Here we go. Jake and Josh are here to analyze the game they love for the team they love. This is another Dolphins podcast. Here's your host, Jake Mendel and Josh Houtz.
Thanks for tuning in to another edition of another Dolphins podcast. The season is winding down. There's only 3 games remaining on the 2023-24 schedule, but we keep going here. And because I have hell of a co-host, we have a great show coming for you today. Joshua Houtz. What's up, dude?
How's it going, man? Glad I can come on here and talk Dolphins football with you. You said you can hear the kids there. They're stoked for the podcast. You said we have 3 left, though. We technically have 4, right? Because the Pro Bowl flag football game, right? And we have a bunch of Dolphin players in that. So I'll be watching. I'll be posting videos. But I can't believe the season's trickling down, man. How was your weekend? Those were some pretty fantastic games this past week.
We had an interesting weekend of football. Thank God we don't have to deal with Buffalo Bill fans anymore. That is always exciting. But, man, I got to start on X because the algorithm has gotten to me. Have you seen there was this one post that was basically, does anyone have that one sitcom clip? And, man, it's just thrown me a loop. My entire algorithm are just Always Sunny clips, Arrested Development clips. I sent you the Pepe Sylvia clip, and, man, I got to tell you, Lucille Bluth in Arrested Development, the clip that always gets me, I always go back to talking to Michael about the economy, and Lucille brings up bananas and asks, what do they cost, Michael? $7 for a banana? There are just some clips that I don't know if it brings me back to my Vine days or what, but just these like 13 to like 17 second clips of just pure comedy gold, man. I didn't get a lot of work done today just looking at those.
Yeah, and that Charlie one, I mean, that's iconic, right? I mean, that was one of my favorite episodes. I went and changed my profile to Pepe Sylvia. I went and then changed my that's what I changed my location to. So best gift, best video, I guess, that could have went around, and that was a good way to start this day. But like you said, man, it took your entire day away.
Dude, the ASMR of Charlie banging his hand on a door while screaming Carol as he's trying to uncover this whole Ponzi scheme inside of their wherever they were working. Dude, it just threw me for a loop, and it was just so funny. Yeah, if you have never watched Always Sunny and you're looking for a show to sit back and enjoy, same thing about Arrested Development. That one's just full of so many one-liners. Josh, did you ever watch Arrested Development?
Yeah, I actually did when I was in culinary school. I didn't really ever see an episode of it. Finally watched it. And, oh, my God, that was awesome.
Dude, the literal doctor gets me every time. Just, your son's going to be all right. No, because he lost his left hand, so he can only use his right hand. The literal doctor, man, that's just purest of pure writing. But I want to talk about these games. The conference championships are set. We have the 49ers facing the Lions and the Ravens facing the Chiefs. Man, was there anything that you kind of flat out, we're Dolphin fans, we're not really used to playing in the divisional round. I mean, we can kind of say that. Is there anything you really learned this weekend about where the Miami Dolphins are and what they need to do in order to be one of those teams, winning 2-3 playoff games in hopefully 3 playoff games in a postseason?
I don't know, man. I guess the negative Dolphins fan in me is just watching all those teams and just thinking, wow, the Dolphins must be, this far apart from those guys. And when you think about it, if we could have stayed healthy, who knows what may have happened. So I guess my biggest thing is that maybe we shouldn't be so down on how this season ended, but when you see Josh Allen out there, when you see Patrick Mahomes taking over games with, grocery baggers, right? Or, dishwashers there as his receiving core. I mean, it's impressive stuff, and it gives us a little bit of a hint as to, maybe we're not as close as we think, but I'm going to take it the other way and say that we're closer than we might think.
One thing I think I need the Dolphins to do is just have, whether it's to have Mike McDaniel be in someone's ear or for someone to be in Mike McDaniel's ear, because these late game situations, man, are just getting crazier and crazier. So the Chiefs beat the Bills 27-24. I mean, I'm sure everyone's watched enough recaps about the games from now. Josh, you have 6 touchdowns scored, 3 field goals. That's a lot of extra points. That's a lot of kicks. And from the start of this game in Western New York, in Buffalo, everyone was freaking out about the wind. The first field goal, I think it was Harrison Butker, kicks it through perfectly. And, even at the start of the game, you heard Tony Romo and Jim Nantz, even though you don't want to listen to them. I mean, what a tough listen those guys are. But for 3 quarters, we heard about how the wind was going to be a factor. And it wasn't. why did everybody ignore that? And all of a sudden it came down to Taylor Bass missing that extra point, or that field goal, wide right. The kick went wide right. The wind just took it away. Man, I just feel like, especially in these playoff games, there are so many things happening at once where you kind of forget what happened 5 minutes ago. And we see the Miami Dolphins, the late game situations they run into. Why aren't we running the football more? Just really these stabilizing questions about how these late playoff game situations become so tense. I mean, dude, the Bills greenlit a fake punt when you have Josh Allen being Godzilla, just terrorizing the entire universe, and you think DeMar Hamlin on a fake punt for 4 yards is the situation to go. So I think what I'm starting to realize, and I think people said this about Andy Reid for years and years, those late game situations, I think it has less to do with just how much somebody knows about football, and it just kind of show how much is going on in these late game situations, how intense seeing a 24-24 game in the fourth quarter is. I mean, even we had the Buccaneers trailing 31-23 with a minute left. They still had an opportunity to go down and win the game. So there are two things that really stuck out. One, having that guy in Mike McDaniel's ear, and two, just keeping the game in reach where you don't have to kind of extend and go for that home run ball. And everyone was giving Josh Allen a lot of graves because what was it, man? I think he completed 16 passes behind the line of scrimmage. He had some amazing deep throws that were dropped. I'm not trying to glaze too much here or anything, but the one gripe we had about Tua's game more than anything, man, could you imagine if he completed that behind the line of scrimmage pass to Devon Achane? Josh Allen was fantastic. Lamar Jackson was absolutely bananas in his game. Patrick Mahomes was fantastic as well. There were a lot of outstanding players out there, but what I also realized is that you really cannot overlook the little things. There's no reason Mecole Hardman should be running the ball into the end zone just to fumble it out of the back of the end zone because you have Travis Kelce, Isaiah Pacheco. Those are the two things I really am going to focus in on. Finding that extra coach to be in McDaniel's ear and those little details, man. That's how you win these late season games, and that's coming from a Dolphins fan who knows nothing.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what happened. And it was just, I guess, interesting to see the way these teams who have been here before, right? They still are making these mistakes. So, Again, Mike McDaniel, second year calling plays, second year as a head coach. Hopefully it all comes together. But again, those are the things late in the year when you're struggling for your playoff life, you have to have the communication on point. And it always seems like whether it was Buffalo, 2 years ago, this year, they just are struggling to get the communication in there. And then they're struggling to execute. I mean, I don't know what happened to this offense late in the year, but that's a story for another day. But overall, man, I think when you're looking at these playoff games, I think these are probably two of the best matchups we've seen in a couple of years, don't you think?
Oh, God, man, I absolutely love this. I mean, looking ahead, I kind of am eyeing a Ravens 49ers Super Bowl. I know that's kind of lazy to go back to 2013 when they played. But, man, you have the Ravens, that defense, and it's so I don't even want to say frustrating because it is what it is, but I mean, Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen, what an absolutely fun combination to watch. And then you have a team like the 49ers who you also feel can make that run and finally clinch that Super Bowl they've been looking for. A big reason they are so strong on the defensive end. You have Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, who had 2 interceptions. He was trying to return one for a pick 6 because Warner told him before the game that he thought he'd have a pick 6. So Greenlaw was really going above and beyond, kind of doing his best like Fred Flintstone impersonation, just trying to sprint all over the field. But man, looking at these teams, and you see even the Chiefs, their defense, I mean, it was so impressive to see their starting 11 in Germany compared to their starting 11 that first round of the playoffs. The continuity there was absolutely insane. It was absolutely awesome. So, I mean, looking at these defenses, that is where I start the conversation, how much fun this final weekend of football is going to be. Joshua, who do you got coming out of these final 2 games here? 49ers, Lions, Ravens, Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see Lamar get there and win one, but I just can't count out Patrick Mahomes, right? I mean, I just feel like him and Andy Reid, they're just pretty unstoppable. So I'm saying that I'm going to go with, we'll go with the Ravens, and it's got to be Ravens and Niners, right? And then everyone's going to say, oh, well, the logo was purple and red, right? It's rigged. I think that's where you have to go. Maybe that's being lazy, like you mentioned. I want to see Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions in there. I want to see, it'll be fun. Who do you got?
I'm right there. I have Ravens 49ers. But the thing about the Lions and the thing of, hey, I wish the Dolphins did that. I mean, man, it is so I don't want to even say it makes me salty, but seeing what Ben Johnson is doing with this offense, right? They got rid of both their running backs in the offseason. They brought in David Montgomery via free agency and their first 2 picks, right? Jahmyr Gibbs and then Sam Laporta. I mean, if the Dolphins hit a 1-2 punch like that, I mean, you'd be over the moon. That's how you win playoff games right there. But the touchdown that won them the game, man, I don't know if you saw, but they were lined up inside the 5-yard line. We know about the issues the Dolphins had in the red zone, but they had, they had Jahmyr Gibbs out there. He was actually outstanding all drive. They had a couple guys in motion, and then it was Craig Reynolds who ran the ball in. So that to me, man, like, the Dolphins all throughout the postseason, late in the season, were trying to be so complex and so detailed in what they're trying to do. But I mean, like, you have Devon Achane run in motion, you have Raheem Mostert run in motion, and then you just hand the ball off to Jeff Wilson. I think there's just so much speed and so much going on there. Like, why can't the Dolphins be doing that? That's the question I found myself seeing them knock in that touchdown they needed to have. I mean, you're going to your third guy on the depth chart, and yeah, Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert be awesome all year. That's before you get to the number one wide receiver in the NFL. I feel like we just overcomplicate things sometimes when you can kind of pull things like that out of your head and realize that the defenders oftentimes are just trying to tackle the scariest looking guys they can.
Yeah, at times it definitely looks like Mike McDaniel and this offense, is overthinking themselves. I do think we can agree Ben Johnson's most likely going to get a head coaching job this offseason, it sounds like. So what the Lions are doing there is just awesome. And to see the way Dan Campbell came in, he talked about biting angles and just building, you don't want to say culture, but building that team to where they are now. I'm a little bit envious, right? I joked about it. They're so spoiled, those damn Lion fans, now that they have a NFC championship appearance. Damn them, dude, because we've never experienced that.
It's true. It's true. It's definitely something the Squidward meme. We're sitting there looking at Patrick and SpongeBob having fun. But like, keep in mind, those first year, I think the first year and a half under Dan Campbell, they had like 4 wins, dude. It was ugly at first. And I think there's something to be said about continuity. And throughout the offseason, I want to keep that in mind because the Miami Dolphins, man, they're entering this offseason. Some places have about minus 42 million in cap space. Other places go as far to say about 50 million. Just kind of hanging out over the cap. So man, the Dolphins really have to figure some things out here. I thought today would be a good day to kind of go, and there's a lot of things that need to happen for this Dolphins team on the salary cap for them to reach that cap threshold, but we're going to take it a step at a time. So Josh, start with a couple facts here to get us kind of comfortable, and we'll see where the day takes us. But we're entering the 2024 offseason. The league average in salary cap space is 21 million. The 4 lowest teams, the Saints, are at negative $82 million in cap space, followed by the Chargers, negative 44, the Bills at negative 43, and then the Miami Dolphins at negative 42. Side note, Josh, the Chargers are interviewing Don Arpont to come be their GM. Who would have saw that coming?
Whoever would have listened to this podcast, right? We were joking that we need to send out the Don Aponte bat signal to get her to come in and fix this cap situation. But they brought her in there to interview her for, was it I guess it would be GM, or was it the head of like football operations? Correct me. Do you know which one it was? I guess you wrote the article, right?
That was for their general manager position.
Okay.
She's held other positions with the Browns, the Jets, the Dolphins as that head of football administration, where it's, God, I couldn't tell you the difference between a lot of these titles, but I mean, they're all involved. They're all involved.
Probably 0 or something, and maybe a little bit less stress. But they have a Ponte interview in there, and then they also have Jim Harbaugh, right? I always get them mixed up. Jim Harbaugh, right? Michigan Wolverines. So there's definitely a timeline at some point. In the introverse, is that what it's called? Is that what the cool? Where we have Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert as our quarterback instead of the Chargers. I'm just gonna throw that out there. That should be a tinfoil hat episode. There it is.
A what if of they actually land Harbaugh in like what was it 2011 and then they draft Justin Herbert as like the follow-up quarterback after winning us. That's some sad fan fiction, dude. That is some real depressing thing.
I will tell you, ever since that plane ride though that Ross took, that has been my number one wish list of a head coach, and I don't know that he's ever going to win anything, but something about me just wanted to see him in those khakis on the Dolphins sideline.
It'd be comforting. Holy moly, dude. Working 8 hours a day, I'm a mess, so I apologize. So we have 3 teams with less cap space than the Miami Dolphins. And this really, them sitting there with $42 million over the cap, has me going back to, 2019, where the Miami Dolphins had a league high $37 million in cap space. You had Ryan Tannehill, $18 million cap hit. Ndamukong Suh, $13 million cap hit. And then Andre Branch, Josh Sutton, and Robert Quinn, some more small cap hits. The key here, Josh, I don't think the Dolphins are going to be ripping this thing apart like it's 2019. Wouldn't you say that's kind of a safe assessment here?
Yeah, I mean, I hope not, but they do have a ton of free agents, right? I mean, they have a ton, and then we're going to sit here and talk about some guys they're going to cut. So I want to say they're not ripping this thing apart, but in a way they kind of are, right?
They have 29 soon-to-be free agents, and I keep going back to that 2019 season because the expectations are different, but I think Chris Greer's job is kind of the same in both of these situations. And don't get me wrong, I think the last 2 years, especially in the draft, have been a massive failure for the Dolphins. Devon Achane has been awesome. I can't wait to see Eric Ezukanma healthy. But you needed guys like Channing Tindall, Cam Smith, at least players, if you drafted someone else in those situations, to come in and be guys. But at the same time, man, the Dolphins didn't have a lot of cap space in 2019 when you mentioned that $37 million in dead cap. It was the tank for Tua a year under Brian Flores. And the Miami Dolphins, man, they had to build their roster with a lot of bottom of the barrel type guys, some undrafted free agents. Preston Williams came out and became a stud. I don't know if you saw, but he's actually be playing with the DC Defenders this year. Andrew Van Ginkel, he was a 5th round pick from that draft. Nick Needham was there. So I think as we kind of start to look at the situation the Miami Dolphins find themselves in, where they're going to be able to free up enough room to have some flexibility, I think the conversation needs to start about what's the value of continuity? Like, would you rather have $7 million in cap space and dead money for 2 years or Jerome Baker? Those are conversations I think we will have. I would personally, I'm starting to lean towards like Jerome Baker, but kind of focusing in on where this team really needs to make an impact with the limited dollars is where this conversation is going to be had for the next 3 months.
Yeah, and I think we're all hoping they, use some of those resources on the offensive line, sign some of their own. We know Cat's a big fan of bringing in some of these guys that, had a little bit of success and isn't really getting paid all that much. I don't know where you want to start, Jake, but the first thing that pops out to me, and I don't know that if this is how you want to go about it, right? You want to jump into this because Xavier Howard, I mean, he himself even said, right, like straight up, if your boss asked you to take a pay cut, would you? And he's like, I mean, let's be honest, man, nobody would do that, right? Am I wrong?
So Xavier Howard's cap hit $25 million. That's 10% of the total cap. I am never, ever, 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 did I say ever, going to tell someone to take less money. That is so unfair. And it's pretty unfair that all these contracts are out there for us to kind of pick at and be like, well, if I was in that situation, no, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. Let's just get that out of the way. That said, there was a little part of me that was kind of hoping that this would kind of complete the modern NFL football success story where the team and the player go through some disagreements. There were some issues, but at the end of the day, they kind of work it out, and it was like a feel-good story of a player finishing their career with a team. Doesn't always work out. Welcome to the real world. What was it? The Dolphins signed Byron Jones in the 2020 offseason. They gave him a bigger deal than Xavier Howard had after just going absolutely nuclear, being the team's cornerstone cornerback. So Xavier Howard, Chris Greer talk, they give him a pay raise and they say, just trust us, go out there, play this year. We'll come back next year and give you that raise. Xavier Howard got that raise, became one of the highest paid players on the team. So seeing that conversation, that dialogue, that trust, there was a little part of me that was kind of hoping we'd see a situation where, they work it out. Xavier Howard kind of sees the picture. It was the I scratch your back, you scratch mine type of thing. Not saying he should do that, but the fan in me, the homer bias in me was kind of doing those mental gymnastics to make that conflict resolution play out.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy you definitely wish we could keep around. I just feel like it's, I mean, maybe there's a way they can figure it out, but this is a guy who has 29 total interceptions, 256 total tackles, has been one of the best corners in football when he's healthy. But that's the thing, right? He's been banged up lately. We know that he's getting up there in age. So I can see why the Dolphins wanted to move on with him. I mean, we sat here and kind of thought that maybe the Jalen Ramsey acquisition meant that he was going to be pushed out next year. And with the salary cap going in complete disarray right now, it makes sense. But it just sucks because he got drafted in 2016. He's been around through so many different regimes, and he's been one of our, star players. When this team was so dreadful, when we didn't have all these star players, there wasn't Xavier Howard, right? He was that star player in Madden that you always knew could shut down that opposition. So hate to see him go, but I think it has to happen.
Yeah, the Dolphins are in a spot where you can't be paying, 10, 11% of your salary cap on someone who's going to miss 5-6 games. And he's getting up there in age and shown that, I don't even want to say inability to stay on the field. It's football. You're going to get hurt, and that stinks. But you really need, if you're going to invest 13% of the cap on Tyreek Hill, you expect him to be one of the league's premier wide receivers. If you're paying 11% of the cap for Jalen Ramsey to be a lockdown corner, you expect him to be out there on the field. And you can't really pay one guy to be 10% of your salary cap when you're absolutely begging the defensive coordinator to have your other cornerback shadow guys around the field. I understand that had more to do about Kader Kohou's limitations in the slot, but I do wonder if this Vic Fangio defense is a little different where you can kind of lean into just having that one-star cornerback instead of two. And considering all these issues the Miami Dolphins have, man, I just don't see a way where you can really lean in and expect Xavier Howard to be one of those studs on the boundary for a whole 17-game season. Let me ask you this. The Dolphins lost week 17 to the Baltimore Ravens 56-19. Xavier Howard led that game like the second play of the game. I'm not trying – freak injuries happen all the time. I'm not blaming him, but do you think that Miami's defense would have been a little more prepared if it wasn't a situation where second play of the game someone goes out, if they had the full week to know Xavier Howard isn't going to be there? I think that defense might have even looked a little better than, Kader Kohou and even Vic Fangio just getting absolutely pantsed by Justice Hill. I don't know if that happens if Xavier Howard can be that guy taking up that cap space and just being a sound cornerback.
Yeah, good point. I mean, if Xavier Howard was in that game, who knows what could have happened? I mean, we could go through our entire schedule, right, and sit here and say if Jalen Phillips was in this game, I mean, who knows what could have happened late in the year. So, yeah, I absolutely think it'd be a game changer with Xavier Howard out there. I guess the thing I would have liked to see was someone step up and at least prove that they could be that guy behind him, and we really haven't seen that, right? Kader Kohou, I guess it seemed like they thought he was the most comfortable in the slot at nickel. He had a bad season by his standards, right? He's been around 2 years. It's clearly a sophomore slump. Eli Apple, we can yeet him into the sun, and then Cam Smith they drafted, like you said earlier. I mean, the Channing Tindall pick at linebacker, you wanted him to be that young player to step up. You want Cam Smith to be able to step up when you get rid of it, Xavier Howard, because he has that cheap contract, because he has a similar play style. But what we saw, or I guess what the coaches saw at least, didn't show him enough, I would imagine, to have him go out there as a rookie. Maybe they had all these guys on layaway. That's all we can hope. But seeing Xavier Howard go is going to suck. I guess the one thing I would ask you, Jake, do you think they could potentially get a trade partner? I mean, he is still a pretty solid shutdown corner. And I don't know if I read it on Twitter or if it's just me knowing that he's from Texas, but Houston, I think he might be from Houston. Thinking about him going to that Texans team, I mean, they could be pretty dirty with him there across from Stingley.
That's actually really interesting. Before we get into I just want to mention Cam Smith after the season. He actually had an interesting quote where he said it was frustrating at times to be on the sideline, but overall he actually thought he'd benefit from it. So, I mean, I'm not ready to kind of give up on the pick. Way
too early. And cornerbacks take so long to translate. So, yeah, definitely we'll pump the brakes on calling him a bust. But you know what I mean. We want to see him come out there instead of seeing Eli Apple just get absolutely torn apart like a bad apple.
And it's frustrating, too, especially for someone like Xavier Howard, right? He's on I think it's a 5-year deal currently. And 2024 is the highest cap hit he has of that entire deal. It's going to be close to 11%. And then it drops to 9% and then 8% in 2025 and 2026. So, Josh, if the Dolphins trade or move on from Xavier Howard, it's going to be a post-June 1 designation. Now, teams can designate 2 players to be cut as I'm doing a terrible job at wording this, but basically what I'm trying to say is there's a whole thing about signing bonuses going on. And if the Dolphins designate Xavier Howard as a post-June 1st cut, they can basically spread out the dead money on his cap hit over 2 years. So, for example, if the Dolphins were to trade him post-June 1st, they'd have a dead cap hit of $7.4 million, but they'd have cap savings of about $18.5 million. Now, the same thing is true if they were to cut post-June 1, but if they cut pre-June 1, the dead cap is $23 million, and you're only saving about $3 million in cap savings. Josh, this is where people start to have the idea of, is the salary cap fake? No, it's not fake, but I kind of look at it like playing a racing game. I like to use Rocket League. It's like Boost. Salary cap is your boost. you only have a limited amount of boost. And you can use that to kind of sprint past that Xavier Howard contract and ignore the money. But the thing is, if you're not taking in that, absorbing that hit of $23 million this year, you're taking half of it this year and half of it next year. And all of a sudden, every year, that total amount of boost you can have gets lower and lower and lower. Now, you can still work around a bunch of things with restructuring contracts, but eventually you're going to need, it could only be 1 year, but a teardown year. And we see the Rams do that this year, and they still made the playoffs. We see other teams kind of march on through that. The Saints, if they had any sort of a quarterback, their contract situation would have looked just as ugly, but they've been on the verge of winning the play or making the playoffs in a weak NFC South. So that kind of makes sense there. That is the one thing, though, Josh. I think you're right. I think Xavier Howard's the one tough one where the Dolphins have so many moves to make, and the juice isn't worth the squeeze having that contract on the books, where it makes sense to eat some dead money and probably eat some dead money over the next 2 years, because this is still a roster that I think can win now.
Yeah, and I think that's where I would go, right? If they can't trade him, I think he would end up being then a post-June 1st cut, because it does get spread out, gives them a nice little cap relief. And I think that's honestly the first place they're probably going to look. I mean, you heard Xavier Howard's comments. It's going to suck to see him go, like I said, but it's time now. He's been around, been in the league 7 years. I have Spotrac up, and it says that he has the number 2 highest cap hit out of all cornerbacks in the NFL, number 4 on the Miami Dolphins roster. So
guess who has the number 1 cornerback cap hit?
Ramsey,
huh? How about them apples? So, and
how many games? I wish I had a number of how many games they were on the field together, because it didn't feel like they were on. They weren't really together much of the season, and we can look back and say, what if? Then that's going to be our biggest what if. What if we had our Patrick Surtain and Sam Madison for a full 17, 18 game season?
I don't want to get well actually here, man, but look at these playoff games over the weekend. How many of those secondaries had 2 lockdown cornerbacks? I wonder if this is something like part of that Josh Boyer thought process where you did have your corners out on an island. I wonder if you bring in Jalen Ramsey and you can't just refresh the entire unit in one season. I wonder if it was kind of part of the transition to have Jalen Ramsey be that guy and then settle in maybe just to use Madden lingo, a couple 78s, a couple 80s where you can kind of lean into some strengths, because the way the Fangio scheme set up, the way they use zone defense, the only reason you don't want Ramsey shadowing all the time is because it makes it so obvious what you're doing in coverage. And we saw that you can shadow and it can work. You saw that against Garrett Wilson and the Jets, but you also saw the Dolphins do a damn good job of limiting Josh Allen, especially in the red zone, by really leaning into that zone defense and confusing him a little bit.
Yeah, that's the thing we're most frustrated about. But I keep thinking back to at least the first Dolphins-Chiefs game, right? They pretty much completely shut down. Fangio knew exactly what they were doing. They shut down Travis Kelce there. So I like that you're mentioning that, because maybe their plan is to just have Jalen Ramsey on one side and kind of, let's be honest, quarterbacks aren't looking that way very often. So they're looking the other way. You plug it in with some 78 guys. You still got Javon Holland roaming around. They got to sign Deshaun Elliott. That's I think what the hardest thing is here. We're sitting here trying to figure out who to cut to, get under the cap. But even then, at some point, you got to start re-signing some of your own guys, right? Lots of quick decisions to be made over the next 2 months. And we got to buckle up, because we're going to be sitting there writing these news articles on the Finsider all off season long and doing these podcasts. So make sure you subscribe and like and all that good stuff.
It's always hard to do these shows because everyone wants to just make the laundry list of dudes that are going to be cut, and things change so fast. I don't want to sit out here and say, yeah, this player needs to be cut in X, Y, and Z, but I did want to go through some other players, Josh, where it's worth at least having a conversation based on their salary. The Dolphins having the fourth, it can't even be the 4th littlest cap space when it doesn't exist. They're that deep in the hole. So some more cuts, Josh. These are non-June cuts where they just be cut before. And the thing with the June designated cut post-June 1st as well is that money doesn't come off the books until then. So it's not like you can go out there and spend. You might be able to convince some second-tier guys after that first wave of free agency, we'll give you this, but we just need to wait to sign it. And that's where the Miami Dolphins might lean into re-signing some players. But if they cut Emmanuel Ogbah, that saves $13 million, about $4 million dead cap. There's no reason I wouldn't push that and have it be a post-June 1st, $2 million to a $4 million cap hit. I don't think that's so huge. And honestly, man, it was a little upsetting when you kind of see Ogbah, 15, 20 minutes before inactives are released, tweeting things like LOL or shocked. And then he has opportunities against Baltimore and Kansas City and Buffalo to do something. And he was nowhere to be found, because he isn't like the Justin Houstons and the Melvin Ingram. Like, he was supposed to be a part of this team, and it just did. It was the Andre Branch thing all over again.
Yeah, I have him written down too. I actually have him circled. I think you're right with that. I do think the post June would be they'd get what? You're spreading it out though. You're just kicking the can then. So I like that, man. Emmanuel Agba, I mean, I wish he would have stepped up when we needed him most, but it just didn't happen. So yeah, he's on my list. I'm circled as well, and I think he's as good as gone. I mean, we don't want to sit here and wish these guys, the work, getting cut, right? We don't want them to lose their job, but when we have to do these articles, you guys sit here and try to find money. And Emmanuel Agba, he's definitely part of that cap casualty situation.
Two guys I want to package in. You cut Jerome Baker, you save $9 million, $5 million still on the books. You cut David Long, saves $4.5 million, $2.2 million on the books. Dude, I think the value of continuity, the value of having these two guys on the roster playing well together is worth whatever you think you're going to get. Maybe you'll try to draft someone early who can be a day one starter. But man, I think for the combined price tag of what, $20 million for two starting veteran linebackers, I think you're happy with David Long and Jerome Baker. I know there are going to be tough decisions. I don't think they will involve either of these two guys. Famous last words.
Yeah, I don't think I would get rid of it. I do have Jerome Baker, circled in case we have to make some money. Then you'd have Duke Riley stepping into a starter role, and I think, we like the guy. He's a very good special teams player. You see him making plays, but I don't know if you want him out there starting, especially over Nick Roll, Jerome Baker. So unless you are going to draft someone or have your eye on someone in free agency, I would keep Jerome Baker around, and David Long, that wouldn't even be a question to me. I love that acquisition. I think he really stepped it on after he was in this defense for a couple weeks, I guess, or months, and we saw him just show that he has another gear and that he is going to be a centerpiece in this defense. So maybe Jerome Baker if you have to make a cut, but overall you want both those guys together.
Yeah, and I just kind of look at what this defense is going to be, especially at the beginning of the year. You're down your top two pass rushers at least probably for a month. I'm going to stay positive and hope they'll be back sooner. But that's why I think having those two veteran guys in the middle is going to be so important for this defense. We saw Duke Riley kind of get abused late in the season, but even just early in the season, just having those two guys so the defense can hit the ground running. I mean, I'm going to be a broken record, man. I think continuity is going to be so important as the Dolphins look to push back in the playoffs. If you can keep guys like Jerome Baker and David Long Jr., I don't think you're going to find anything better. And I think it makes sense. You have those two guys. You have Duke Riley as backup, and then one of your first two picks, I think if it's not an offensive lineman, I think it's going to be a linebacker. Two guys I want to also package in together because I think the decisions might be cut and dry. Prove me otherwise. Mike White, if you cut him, you save $3.5 million with $1.7 million on the books. And then Keon Crossan saves $3 million with $0 on the books. I think those are two guys who might be out. I don't think Mike White has really done enough to show that he could be a backup in this league. And what we want the Dolphins to do is keep shooting those quarterback darts. I mean, we just had Brock Purdy come out and say following the 49ers win over the Packers that the 49ers were trying to talk to Tom Brady at the beginning of the year, right? So there are teams out there that are always just, hey, how can we get better? How can we get better? It's not a slight on Tua or anything like that, but I think when you're wondering how you can get better, it's not by having Mike White on the books for an extra $3.5 million.
Yeah, I actually had to send you my photo because I took a screenshot of the top salaries on the Dolphins, then circled in green all of the guys I have. And the only reason Alec Ingold's on there is because of what Kat said. But let's be honest, man, Mike White, I think you liked what you saw, at least on Hard Knocks, and you saw as a backup. We saw him throw a touchdown pass to our boy Robbie Chosen, but I think you can upgrade, throw a dart in the draft. I think I keep joking about it, but J.J. McCarthy, man, the quarterback from Michigan, I just keep thinking of Stephen Ross just saying, you know what, F all these guys. I'm just going to make my pick. Forget it. I'm tired of this crap. But yeah, I think Mike White's gone, and then Keon Cross, and that's another guy that looked promising at one point, stepped up. I think it was 2 seasons ago, but I just don't see where he fits on the roster. So I just want to show you visual evidence that I at least had the same idea, because you're usually the brains of this. We're Pinky and the brain, and you're definitely the brains of this.
Oh, dude, no, I definitely have my Pinky moments. Ingold, if he's let go, that's a $3.5 million cap savings. Dude, again, it's nothing to do with him. I mean, you have Kyle Juszczyk being awesome for the 49ers. You have Patrick Ricard being awesome for the Baltimore Ravens. Alec Ingold's higher paid than both of them. I think there's room for Alec Ingold to have a great spot on this team, but until you prove it otherwise, I mean, that cap hit is definitely, you're not getting the most out of Alec Ingold-Buchanan, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I think the main reason I hate that I come in here so hot. I think the main reason that they they keep him around or at least utilize him so much is because he kind of, throws the defense off right when he's out there. He can line up as and I think they just need to utilize him more. If we sat here and saw him get those carries late in the year in those key situations that we're sitting here that we couldn't convert, or playing in cold weather and things like that, we might be sitting here and saying he's worthy. Who knows? Maybe a couple contracts get signed and we're sitting here saying this isn't that bad of a deal. But when you're looking at the roster, again, nitpicking, trying to find, comb, and go through and get rid of players who, I mean, like we said, we want to see more usage out of him. So I do think he's a guy that he has to be around in this offense for it to click. But at that price, I mean, I don't know what to think.
Jason Sanders for $4 million. With we have to say, he is the only reason the Dolphins be a team with a winning record this year is Jason Sanders.
Yeah, and I think if the Bills had him, they'd probably be in this. I saw that one too. I didn't circle it, I don't think, because I just couldn't do it. But I do think
there's a conversation, but I agree. Yeah.
Well, he really showed up this year, right? I mean, he made some crucial kicks, but that's a stiff price there. And I do think you can get some cheap rookie or, there's some plenty of free agents out there that would probably love to come to Miami. So definitely something to consider.
Some restructures the Dolphins can do where they're changing things into signing bonuses. And this does kind of nibble at you down the road, but this is more Stephen Ross breaking out a checkbook. You can restructure Ramsey to save 18 mil. That sounds like something the Dolphins might do. Restructuring Bradley Chubb saves 14 mil. That's also something they might do. Xavier Howard, 13 mil. Jerome Baker, 6.5 mil. And something else also worth mentioning, the Dolphins already have 10 mil in dead cap on the books for next year. That's Byron Jones. So just kind of keep in mind with these contracts. Like they do stick around, even if they're post June 1st, that you are going to need to take you're losing a little bit of boost. That's probably the best way I can describe it. Your boost, you do not have 100% boost anymore. Doesn't mean you can't win. It doesn't mean you can't make moves or anything like that. But what it does also mean is that Chris Grier, my friend, you better hit on some draft picks. You need some cheap talent in here ASAP.
Yeah, there's so much back and forth over whether or not, Chris Grier, people are like, fire Chris Grier. Other people are like, he's been fine and awesome. I mean, now's when he needs to step up to the plate and hit that home run, because if he doesn't, at some point the nuke's going to drop and they're going to completely clean house. I think another name you can throw out there is also maybe Tyreek Hill for a restructure. Didn't they already restructure him? Or was that last year? I can't remember. And then a guy I have written down that I don't know if we mentioned was Jeff Wilson. He could be cut too, right? I mean, I think was he getting paid higher than Raheem Mostert? I forget. I think he was. Yeah. So that's another name we can throw out there, and then we can use some money to go sign Derrick Henry. I mean, people keep we joked about it, but I keep seeing it going around. So I'm like, I got to keep throwing that out there because we were one of the first to bring that up. But overall, man, like you said, do not envy Chris Grier and his group of his little council, I guess. They better figure it out for sure, because we thought we had a 2-year window, and sorry guys, that was year one.
To wrap up here, Josh, do you think Chris Grier is the right guy for the job? Do you have faith in Chris Grier still? No, I don't think having faith. Do you think he's the right guy for the job? I'm going to word it that way instead of the faith.
I don't know. I think my biggest thing was I've gone back. If you go back in the past, Houtz probably said that we should have cleared house, right? I mean, I feel like if you're getting rid of a head coach and it went from Ireland to Chris Grier, right? Was that not the
Dennis Hickey was in there? You had
I was gonna say it was Dennis Hickey. It was all the same little group of people. I mean, at no point did they ever completely wipe house. But this was Chris Grier's second opportunity to bring in a head coach. So I don't know if he's the right guy. He had some awesome picks, some guys that we're huge fans of, but I think this year is gonna play a large role in that. And you just wonder how much at some point they might get rid of. I'm not even going to talk about it. But yes, I think Chris Grier for now his seat's getting a little hot. What do you think?
Seat is so hot, and I have no confidence in him. But I also think he's the only guy for the job right now. I look at what this team did in 2019 and how he was able to find some of those acorns. They're going to need acorns, man. When you look at the guys they signed to future contracts this year, and you compare it to last year, 5 of the 8 this year have played in games for the Dolphins. I think 1 of the 7 last year did. So there's going to be situations here where the Dolphins need to know the talent they have on the roster. They need to know the weaknesses of the roster. I'm not saying that Chris Grier knows those things. I'm not confident he does, but I'm very confident nobody can come in here on one day's notice, come in here and work so hard in the margins where this team improves. That's the kind of where I settle in on this, where he might not be the right guy for the job, but for right now, he's the only guy for the job because you have time against your side. You don't have money on your side. And yeah, I just think that there's no better option at the moment.
Yeah, and I don't want to say he's got us into this mess, but he kind of did, right? I mean, so do we talk about any extensions that could be made? We all know Tua Tagovailoa's extension, I think, can lower that. But I yeah, man, I don't envy him. I was going to joke, what's Nick Saban up to? Did he ever confirm a role with Alabama? Because we could see Ross just say, you know what, Chris Greer, you go out, we'll bring in Nick Saban, Tua Tagovailoa's boy. I'm tinfoil hat, man. You brought it up. I don't have one on.
That'd be a little too far. I don't think I'd be able to handle that. Nick Saban trying to recruit NFL players to come to South Florida now.
He's trying to apologize for failing before and being so mean to all the other guys, Matt Roth and them.
Oh, dude, there's not a lot of confidence in this group, and I totally get that. But at the same time, I just think it'd be so unrealistic to have someone come in and say, this is what we have to do to put ourselves in the best situation to win. One other final thing, I think Vic Fangio is safe to stay with the Dolphins. There was some hardball coaching tree rumors leaked about if he was going to go to the Chargers. Fangio wasn't mentioned in any of them, so that's a nice bonus. But are you surprised too? Danny Crossman, there's been no conversation about maybe the Dolphins making changes at special teams, and that to me is even a little concerning, especially week after week in the playoffs. Man, there's one or two special teams play that makes or breaks you, and we know how bad the Dolphins are in those situations.
Yeah, I'd be a little bit surprised just because I kind of thought Danny Crossman would be fired, last offseason at this time. So maybe we hear something throughout the week. It is only, Tuesday? But, yeah, man, I just don't know that it's going to happen. And, that's a whole nother issue because special teams was not good this year. Another
issue for another podcast. Thank you all so much for listening to another episode of Another Dolphins podcast. We will be back later this week. Merrick will be joining us to go through some news and notes you might have missed as you're out there enjoying life. But until next time, thank you so much for tuning in to another Dolphins podcast. And until then, fins up.
Fins up.